In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite restaurants, appearances dictate who belongs. For 12-year-old Elijah, hunger outweighs fear as he pushes through the gilded doors of Lumiere, leaving his rain-soaked cardboard shelter behind. The slap echoes across marble floors when he reaches for leftover bread, a public humiliation that catches the eye of a solitary diner in the corner. Keanu Reeves rises from his table, setting in motion a chain of events that will transform not just one homeless boy's life, but redefine what it means to see the humanity in others. This is a story of second chances, unexpected kindness, and the powerful ripple effect of compassion. Rain pounded the Manhattan streets on a frigid November evening, washing the city in shades of gray and reflecting the neon lights in expanding puddles. Among the hurried pedestrians with umbrellas and raincoats, a small figure moved differently, hesitant, hunched, lacking purpose or destination. 12-year-old Elijah Parker had been on the streets for 3 months, ever since the system had failed him again, splitting him from his last foster family when they moved out of state. Tonight, hunger clawed at his stomach more fiercely than usual. 2 days had passed since his last proper meal, half a sandwich from a kind deli worker who sometimes slipped him food. The persistent rain had washed away the cardboard he'd been using for shelter, and the November chill had settled deep in his bones, making his thin frame shiver uncontrollably beneath the oversized, waterlogged hoodie. Elijah paused as he rounded the corner onto 58th Street. There, gleaming like a beacon through the dreary night, stood Lumiere, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, he could see the warm glow of crystal chandeliers illuminating tables of immaculately dressed patrons. The restaurant hummed with comfortable conversation and tinkling laughter. Servers in crisp white shirts and black vests moved elegantly between tables, carrying silver trays laden with artfully presented dishes. The aroma wafting through the briefly open door as a couple entered was almost unbearable. Rich butter, roasting meats, freshly baked bread. Elijah unconsciously moved closer, drawn by the scent of food and the promise of warmth. He pressed his face against the glass, watching as diners casually left portions of expensive meals untouched on their plates. A server cleared a table near the window, scraping perfectly good food into a bin. The sight made Elijah's empty stomach contract painfully. Inside Lumiere, everything embodied exclusivity. The maitre d' stood sentinel at a podium of polished mahogany, scanning reservations on a tablet with practiced efficiency. The clientele represented New York's elite, finance executives closing deals over wine, celebrities partially hidden in corner booths, old money families celebrating milestones with champagne toasts. The restaurant maintained an unspoken but rigid barrier between this world and the one outside its doors. For several minutes, Elijah remained frozen in place, calculating risks and possibilities. He knew he didn't belong here. His dirt-smudged face, tangled hair, and worn clothing marked him as an outsider. The restaurant's unspoken dress code alone would disqualify him, not to mention his empty pockets. Yet the contrast between his desperate hunger and the casual abundance inside created a moral imbalance that seemed, to his young mind, to justify what he was about to do. Taking a deep breath, Elijah made his decision. He waited until the maitre d' stepped away from his station to escort guests to their table. Then, summoning courage born of desperation, he pushed through the heavy glass door and slipped inside. The sudden warmth enveloped him, along with the full symphony of aromas that had only teased him from outside. For a brief, disorienting moment, he stood just inside the entrance, dripping rainwater onto the immaculate marble floor, invisible amid the restaurant's sophisticated bustle. His invisibility wouldn't last. Already, heads were turning. A woman in pearls nudged her companion, eyebrows raised in alarm. A server paused mid-stride, confusion crossing his face. The momentary spell of belonging shattered, and Elijah felt the full weight of his audacity. But hunger drove him forward nonetheless, toward a recently vacated table where a basket of untouched bread still sat. In that moment, reaching for sustenance seemed worth whatever consequences might follow. The bread basket sat just inches from Elijah's trembling fingers when a sharp voice cut through the ambient restaurant noise. "Stop right there!" The maitre d' had returned to his station and spotted the intruder immediately. He moved with surprising speed for a man of his stature, crossing the room in long strides. "What do you think you're doing?" Elijah froze, his hand still extended toward the bread. The restaurant seemed to fall silent around him, conversations halting mid-sentence as attention shifted to the unfolding scene. The boy's heart hammered against his ribs as dozens of eyes focused on him, some curious, others disgusted, most simply uncomfortable with this disruption to their carefully curated evening. I'm sorry, Elijah stammered, his voice barely audible. I was just so hungry. The maitre d', whose gold name tag read Philippe, looked down at the boy with a mixture of annoyance and revulsion, taking in the soaked clothes, dirty face, and matted hair. A puddle had formed beneath Elijah's worn sneakers, spreading across the pristine marble floor. Philippe's lips pressed into a thin line as he calculated the damage to the restaurant's atmosphere. "This is Lumiere, young man, not a soup kitchen," he said coldly. "We have standards here. Paying customers wait weeks for reservations." The restaurant manager appeared now, a tall woman in an impeccable black suit, her expression hardening as she assessed the situation. "Is there a problem, Philippe? This street urchin has wandered in, Ms. Beaumont. I was just explaining that we don't serve his kind here." Ms. Beaumont's gaze swept over Elijah with clinical detachment, as though he were a pest rather than a child. "I see. Please remove him immediately. The Whittingtons are about to arrive for their anniversary dinner." Philippe gripped Elijah's shoulder with uncomfortable force, fingers digging into the boy's collarbone as he steered him toward the exit. Several diners averted their eyes, suddenly fascinated by their meals or companions. Others watched with undisguised contempt, as though Elijah had personally offended them by his presence. "But I haven't eaten in days," Elijah protested, his voice cracking. "I just wanted some bread. No one was eating it anyway." "That's not your concern," Philippe hissed, tightening his grip. "The arrangement of our tables, the preparation of our food, the disposal of our waste, none of it concerns you." They had almost reached the door when Elijah spotted a busboy clearing a table, scraping barely touched food into a garbage bin. Something in him snapped. The injustice of watching food being thrown away while his stomach cramped with hunger overwhelmed his sense of caution. He twisted suddenly out of Philippe's grasp and lunged toward the table. "Please, just one piece." The sharp crack of flesh meeting flesh silenced the restaurant completely. Philippe had struck Elijah across the face, the slap echoing in the sudden stillness. The boy stumbled backward, his cheek blazing with pain and humiliation, tears welling in his eyes despite his desperate effort to contain them. "How dare you!" Philippe's face had flushed dark with anger. "Filthy little thief!" Ms. Beaumont stepped forward, her heels clicking ominously against the floor. "That's quite enough, Philippe." She turned to a security guard who had materialized near the entrance. "Thomas, please escort this young man out and ensure he understands not to return." The security guard, a mountain of a man with hands like sledgehammers, nodded grimly and moved toward Elijah, who backed away instinctively. The tears had spilled over now, tracking clean lines down his dirt-smudged face. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though no one seemed to be listening. "I'm really sorry." Thomas took his arm, less roughly than Philippe had but with unmistakable authority. "Come on, kid. Time to go." As they approached the door, the rain outside seemed to intensify, sheets of water cascading from a black sky. Elijah could feel the cold waiting to reclaim him, the temporary warmth of the restaurant already fading from his bones. The security guard hesitated briefly, perhaps registering the severity of the weather, but Ms. Beaumont's pointed stare from across the room hardened his resolve. "Don't come back here," Thomas advised quietly as he opened the door. "They'll call the police next time." With a gentle but firm push, Elijah was expelled back into the night. The door closed behind him with finality, sealing the boundary between worlds. He stood motionless on the sidewalk, rain mingling with tears on his face, the imprint of Philippe's hand still burning on his cheek. Through the window, he could see the restaurant returning to normal. Conversations resuming, servers moving between tables, the momentary disruption already forgotten by most. Elijah had never felt more invisible, more insignificant. He turned away from the light and warmth of Lumiere, prepared to disappear back into the shadows of the city. But fate had other plans for him that night, in the form of a solitary diner who had not returned to his meal, who had watched the entire scene unfold with quiet intensity from a secluded corner table. The solitary diner in the corner booth had remained motionless throughout the entire confrontation, his dark eyes following the scene with quiet intensity. Keanu Reeves had come to Lumiere seeking anonymity, a rare evening to himself between filming days, hidden behind a subtle disguise of glasses and a short beard. He'd chosen the restaurant for its reputation for discretion with celebrity clients. Now he set down his fork, meal forgotten, as the injustice unfolded before him. Keanu had witnessed everything, The desperate hunger in the boy's eyes, the unnecessary force of the maitre d's response, the cruel indifference of most patrons, and the performative removal that had culminated in that unconscionable slap. Something stirred within him, a recognition perhaps, a memory of his own struggles before fame, or simply the basic human decency that had remained his core despite Hollywood's corrupting influence. Without announcing his presence or drawing attention to himself, Keanu rose from his table and moved toward the restaurant entrance. Several patrons glanced his way, a ripple of recognition passing through the room as they realized who had been dining among them. He pulled his wallet from his jacket, extracted several $100 bills, and pressed them into the security guard's hand as he stepped outside into the rain. The boy hadn't gone far. He sat huddled against the building's exterior wall, partially sheltered by a decorative overhang, arms wrapped around his knees as he tried to make himself smaller against the cold. Rain still found him, soaking through his already drenched clothing. The red mark on his cheek stood out starkly against his pale skin. Keanu crouched down, unmindful of the puddles soaking into his expensive trousers, and spoke gently, "Hey there!" Elijah flinched at the unexpected voice, looking up with wary, red-rimmed eyes. Recognition flickered across his face. Even a homeless child recognized Keanu Reeves, followed immediately by confusion. "They shouldn't have treated you that way," Keanu continued, his voice low and calm against the backdrop of falling rain. "No one deserves that. Especially not a kid." Elijah said nothing, suspicion replacing confusion. Experience had taught him that unexpected kindness often came with hidden costs. "I'm Keanu," he said unnecessarily, extending his hand slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal. "What's your name?" "Elijah," the boy answered after a lengthy pause, ignoring the offered hand. "Elijah Parker." "Well, Elijah Parker, I'd like to buy you dinner, if that's okay." The boy's eyes widened. "They won't let me back in there." "They will," Keanu assured him with quiet confidence. "Come on." Inside Lumiere, Ms. Beaumont was personally attending to an elderly couple when the door opened again. Her practiced smile froze as she saw who had entered, and who accompanied him. The restaurant fell into another hush, this one born of celebrity recognition rather than uncomfortable disruption. "Mr. Reeves," she recovered quickly, moving toward them. "Is everything all right? We can certainly arrange a more private table if you're being disturbed." "I'm not the one who was disturbed," Keanu replied evenly. "This young man and I would like a table. Your best one, please." Ms. Beaumont's smile tightened as she glanced at Elijah, still dripping rainwater onto the floor. "I'm afraid we have certain standards." "I understand completely," Keanu interrupted, his tone remaining pleasant but taking on an edge of steel. "Your standards include treating hungry children with dignity. Or they should." Philippe had appeared at Ms. Beaumont's elbow, his expression oscillating between sycophantic deference to the celebrity and disgust toward the boy. "Perhaps the young gentleman would be more comfortable somewhere else? We could arrange takeout." "He'll be comfortable right here," Keanu said with finality. "With me." "Now, about that table." The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the maitre d' reluctantly led them to a prime table near the window, the very spot where Elijah had first pressed his face to the glass. Philippe pulled out chairs with mechanical politeness, his face a mask of professional restraint barely concealing his displeasure. "And perhaps a towel for my young friend?" Keanu added. "He got caught in the rain." A server hurried forward with linen napkins. Another appeared with a glass of water for Elijah, placing it carefully on his right as protocol dictated, though the boy seemed bewildered by the formality. Conversations gradually resumed throughout the restaurant, though many eyes continued to flicker toward their table with undisguised curiosity. "Order anything you want," Keanu told Elijah, pushing the menu toward him. "Everything here is good." Elijah stared at the menu, intimidated by the French terminology and lack of prices. "I don't know what any of this is." "The chicken is excellent," Keanu suggested. "And maybe start with some soup?" "Something warm." When the waiter arrived to take their order, he addressed only Keanu, conspicuously ignoring Elijah's presence. Keanu noticed immediately. "My friend will order first," he said pointedly. The waiter reluctantly turned to Elijah, who mumbled his order for chicken and soup, shrinking under the scrutiny. Keanu added a selection of appetizers to the order. "Bring them all at once, please," recognizing the urgency of the boy's hunger. As the waiter departed, Elijah looked directly at Keanu for the first time. Why are you doing this? The question hung between them, simple, direct, cutting through pretense. In the background, the restaurant continued its elaborate choreography of luxury and exclusivity, seemingly undisturbed now by the presence of this incongruous pair. Yet something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of Lumiere that evening, a disruption more profound than the momentary scandal of a homeless boy's intrusion. Keanu considered the question carefully, aware that his answer mattered. Because sometimes people forget what matters. And sometimes they need to be reminded. The appetizers arrived first, a parade of small, artfully arranged plates bearing delicacies Elijah couldn't name. Keanu pushed them toward the center of the table, encouraging the boy to try whatever appealed to him. Elijah hesitated briefly before hunger overcame caution. He reached for a crostini topped with something pink and glistening. "That's smoked salmon with creme fraiche," Keanu explained, noticing the boy's uncertainty. "It's fish. Really good fish." Elijah took a tentative bite, eyes widening at the explosion of flavors. Smoky, creamy, bright with lemon and herbs. He chewed slowly, savoring the complexity, before swallowing and reaching for another. Keanu smiled, pushing the plate closer. "Eat as much as you want," he encouraged. Food should be enjoyed, not rationed. Throughout the restaurant, patrons continued their surreptitious observation. Some had recognized Keanu immediately, whispering excitedly behind menus. Others were more fascinated by the unprecedented situation, the juxtaposition of Hollywood royalty and street urchin sharing a meal at Manhattan's most exclusive establishment. Ms. Beaumont hovered nearby, personally ensuring that service remained impeccable despite her evident discomfort. The soup arrived, a velvety butternut squash bisque garnished with toasted pumpkin seeds and a swirl of creme fraiche. Elijah wrapped cold fingers around the warm bowl, inhaling the aromatic steam before taking his first spoonful. For several minutes, he focused entirely on eating, the intensity of his hunger evident in his concentrated silence. Keanu waited patiently, allowing the boy to sate the worst of his hunger before attempting conversation. "How long have you been on your own, Elijah?" The boy glanced up, wariness returning to his eyes. 3 months, maybe. Hard to keep track sometimes. And before that? Elijah shrugged, using bread to wipe the last traces of soup from his bowl. Foster care. Been in the system since I was 7. My last family moved to Ohio. Couldn't take me with them. Something about interstate paperwork. He recited this with practiced detachment, as though discussing someone else's life. I was supposed to get placed with a new family, but I got tired of waiting in the group home. So I left. Keanu nodded, processing this information without displaying the surge of anger he felt toward a system that could so casually misplace a child. No relatives who could take you in? My mom died when I was 6. Dad was never in the picture. Elijah paused, then added with bitter pride, I've been managing okay on my own. The main courses arrived, roasted chicken with herb butter for Elijah, steak for Keanu. The server placed their plates with flourish, then retreated with a bow. Elijah stared at his portion with momentary disbelief. The generous serving of golden-skinned chicken, the delicate arrangement of seasonal vegetables, the gleaming puddle of sauce. Go ahead, Keanu encouraged. It's not getting any warmer. As Elijah ate with gradually decreasing urgency, Keanu shared small, innocuous details about himself. His love of motorcycles, his passion for bass guitar, his favorite books. He avoided mentioning his career or fame, speaking instead about simple pleasures and everyday challenges. Gradually, Elijah began to reciprocate, offering fragments of his own story between bites. I'm good at math, he volunteered unexpectedly. Was in advanced classes before. Everything. Yeah, that's impressive. I like space too. Astronomy and stuff. Used to have this book about constellations. A shadow crossed his face. Had to leave it behind at the group home. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. I've always been fascinated by the stars too. The way they make you feel simultaneously insignificant and connected to something enormous. This philosophical observation earned him a surprised look from Elijah, who had perhaps expected patronizing acknowledgement rather than genuine engagement. A tentative connection formed between them, not the manufactured bonding of celebrity charity, but something more authentic. Two humans recognizing something of themselves in each other despite vastly different circumstances. As the meal progressed, Elijah's body language gradually shifted. His shoulders lowered from their defensive hunch. He made occasional eye contact. His responses grew longer, sometimes even including a hint of humor. The restaurant around them seemed to recede, becoming background noise to their increasingly comfortable exchange. By the time dessert menus appeared, they had established a fragile rapport. Elijah's initial suspicion had not disappeared entirely. Street survival depended on wariness, but it had been temporarily suspended in the warm bubble of this unexpected evening. "I should probably get going," Elijah said suddenly, reality intruding as he glanced toward the rain-streaked windows. "It's getting late." The implication hung unspoken between them. Elijah needed to secure whatever makeshift shelter he could find before the prime spots were taken by other homeless individuals. Keanu set down his water glass deliberately, his expression thoughtful. "Actually, Elijah, I have a proposition for you." Keanu's words hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Elijah's expression shifted subtly, caution returning to his features. Experience had taught him that propositions from strangers, even famous ones, often came with unseen strings attached. "What kind of proposition?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Keanu leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone conversational despite the weight of what he was about to offer. "I'm staying at a hotel not far from here while I finish filming a project in the city. The suite has an extra bedroom that's just sitting empty. I thought you might want to use it, just until we figure out something more permanent." Elijah's eyes widened, disbelief evident in his expression. "You want me to stay with you? At your hotel?" "It's not charity," Keanu clarified, sensing the boy's pride. "Consider it a temporary solution while we sort out your situation. No one should be sleeping on the streets, especially not a kid with your potential." The word potential caught Elijah off guard. Few adults in his life had ever spoken about him that way, as though his future contained possibilities beyond survival. He stared down at his empty dessert plate, processing this unexpected turn of events. "Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me." The question contained layers of suspicion born from years of institutional care and adult disappointment. Keanu considered his response carefully. "When I was about your age, my family went through some really rough times. We moved around a lot, struggled to make ends meet. I know what it's like to feel uncertain about where you'll sleep or what you'll eat." He paused, memories surfacing that he rarely shared publicly. "There were people who stepped up for me when I needed it most. Teachers, friends' parents, neighbors. They didn't solve everything, but they made enough difference to keep me going. Sometimes that's all it takes." The restaurant had largely emptied around them, the late hour thinning the crowd to just a few lingering diners. Rain continued to streak the windows, the world outside appearing increasingly inhospitable compared to the warmth within. "I don't know," Elijah said finally. "Seems too good to be true." "I understand your hesitation," Keanu acknowledged. "How about this? One night, no obligations. You get a hot shower, clean clothes, a real bed. Tomorrow morning, if you want to leave, no questions asked. I'll even give you some cash to help you out." Elijah's mind flashed back to previous nights, huddled in doorways, under bridges, in the relative shelter of subway stations until security moved him along. He thought about the cardboard box that had been his most recent home, now disintegrated in the persistent rain. The prospect of warmth, safety, and cleanliness proved too powerful to resist. "Okay," he agreed cautiously. "Just for tonight." The relief on Keanu's face appeared genuine. He signaled for the check, which Ms. Beaumont delivered personally, hovering with barely concealed curiosity. "Everything was satisfactory, I hope, Mr. Reeves?" "The food was excellent," Keanu replied diplomatically. "The company even better." He gestured toward Elijah, forcing Ms. Beaumont to acknowledge the boy's presence. "Yes, quite," she managed, her smile strained. "We hope to see you again soon." "I think you will," Keanu responded pleasantly. "Both of us." As they prepared to leave, Philippe materialized with Keanu's coat. His eyes slid past Elijah as though the boy were invisible. Keanu noticed this deliberate oversight. "My young friend needs a coat as well," he stated firmly. "I'm afraid we don't have anything suitable," Philippe replied, his disdain barely concealed. Keanu removed his scarf, a simple cashmere piece in charcoal gray, and wrapped it around Elijah's neck. "This will help for now. We'll get you properly outfitted tomorrow." The gesture struck Elijah with unexpected force. He couldn't remember the last time someone had performed such a simple act of care, protecting him from the cold. His throat tightened as he fingered the soft fabric, warm from Keanu's body heat. Outside, the rain had finally slackened to a fine mist. Keanu's driver waited with a black SUV at the curb. The transition from restaurant to vehicle was swift, and soon they were gliding through Manhattan's rain-slick streets toward the hotel. Elijah pressed his face to the window, watching the city lights blur past, still processing the evening's dramatic turn. "You can change your mind, you know," Keanu said quietly. "Any time." Elijah nodded but remained silent, overwhelmed by the rapidly changing circumstances of his life. Just hours ago, he had been a hungry, hopeless figure in the rain. Now he sat in a luxury vehicle beside one of the world's most famous actors, headed toward accommodations he could never have imagined. At the hotel, a discreet, exclusive establishment in Tribeca, Keanu guided Elijah through the lobby with a protective hand on his shoulder. The late hour and Keanu's evident desire for privacy ensured minimal interaction with staff or other guests. A private elevator whisked them to the penthouse suite, where Elijah stood in stunned silence, taking in the spacious accommodations. "The bathroom's through there," Keanu indicated. "Plenty of hot water. I'll find you some clean clothes to sleep in. They'll be big, but better than what you've got on. Are you still hungry? I can order room service." Elijah shook his head, momentarily speechless at this abundance of kindness. Finally he managed, "Thank you. I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Keanu assured him. "Get some rest. We'll figure out next steps in the morning." Later, freshly showered and dressed in a t-shirt that hung to his knees, Elijah stood at the bedroom window, gazing out at the city that had been both his home and his enemy these past months. Far below, he could make out tiny figures hurrying through the rain. People with destinations, with purpose, with somewhere to belong. The enormity of the evening's events washed over him. For the first time in months, he would sleep in a real bed, with clean sheets and without fear of violence or exposure. The luxury of it brought unexpected tears to his eyes, not just for the material comforts, but for the rarer gift of being seen, of having his humanity acknowledged after so long feeling invisible. As he climbed into bed, Elijah remained uncertain about the future. One night of safety didn't erase the harsh realities waiting beyond these walls. But something had shifted within him, a tiny flame of possibility where before there had been only grim determination to survive. He closed his eyes, allowing himself to imagine, just briefly, what life might hold beyond tomorrow. Morning light streamed through the penthouse windows when Elijah awoke, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar softness beneath him and the absence of street noise. Reality rushed back as he registered his surroundings, the spacious guest bedroom of Keanu Reeves' hotel suite. The events of the previous night seemed dreamlike in their improbability, yet the clean clothes laid out at the foot of his bed confirmed their truth. Cautiously, Elijah ventured into the main living area where Keanu sat at a dining table, laptop open, coffee steaming beside him. The actor looked up with a warm smile. "Morning. Sleep okay?" Elijah nodded, still uncertain of his place in this new reality. "Yeah. Better than I have in a long time. There's breakfast." Keanu gestured toward a covered silver tray. "And we should talk about what happens next. No rush though, eat first." Over a meal that included foods Elijah hadn't tasted in years, fresh berries, fluffy omelets, real orange juice, they began mapping out possibilities. Keanu listened intently as Elijah reluctantly shared more details of his circumstances. The series of foster homes, his struggles in the group facility, his reasons for running away. The actor took notes occasionally, asking thoughtful questions without judgment. "I have some connections with social services here in New York," Keanu explained. "People who work around the system rather than within it. They might be able to help find you a more permanent situation, one that actually works for you." Elijah's expression remained guarded. "I'm not going back to another foster home or group facility. I'd rather take my chances on the street." "What if there were other options?" Keanu asked. "Alternative schooling programs, mentorship opportunities, places where you'd have stability without feeling trapped." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Keanu answered it to admit a woman with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a practical bun. She carried a leather portfolio and radiated no-nonsense efficiency tempered with kindness. "Elijah, this is Diane." She runs a foundation I've worked with that helps young people in difficult situations. Diane approached Elijah with a warm smile but didn't attempt physical contact, sensing his wariness. "It's good to meet you, Elijah. Keanu told me a little about your situation. I'd like to discuss some options with you, if that's okay." The next few hours unfolded in a series of conversations, phone calls, and planning sessions. Diane outlined several possibilities: a progressive boarding school in Vermont with full scholarship potential, a specialized program for academically gifted students facing hardship, an apprenticeship program combined with GED completion. Throughout these discussions, Elijah remained skeptical but engaged, asking pointed questions that revealed both his intelligence and his well-earned distrust of institutions. "None of these places can make you any promises," Keanu acknowledged as they reviewed the options. "And I can't promise I'll always be around. But I can commit to making sure you always have a contact, always have resources, and always have choices. No more falling through the cracks." By afternoon, preliminary arrangements had been made for Elijah to visit 2 potential programs. Diane had started the paperwork to become his temporary guardian, a process she assured him involved considerable legal flexibility when the right pressure was applied. Keanu had made calls to ensure Elijah would have financial support regardless of which path he chose. "Why would you do all this for some random kid?" Elijah finally asked when Diane stepped out to make another call. "You barely know me. I could be lying about everything." Keanu considered the question seriously. "I don't think you are. But even if some details weren't exactly right, the bigger truth would still be the same. You're a kid who deserves a chance. And I'm in a position to help make that happen." He paused. "Sometimes the universe puts people in our path for a reason. I've learned not to question it too much when that happens." The transition from homeless obscurity to having options wasn't instantaneous or smooth. The following weeks brought challenges neither of them had anticipated. There were medical appointments that revealed vitamin deficiencies and untreated minor infections. Psychological evaluations indicated trust issues and adaptive behaviors that had helped Elijah survive but might hinder his reintegration into structured environments. Administrative obstacles appeared with frustrating regularity: missing records, jurisdictional complications, bureaucratic resistance. Through it all, Keanu remained steadfast in his support, though necessarily at a distance as his filming schedule took him to different locations. He arranged for a dedicated phone line for Elijah to reach him, regular check-ins with Diane, and emergency protocols if anything went wrong. He maintained a careful balance, present enough to provide stability, distant enough to avoid creating unhealthy dependency. Elijah eventually chose the Vermont school, drawn to its emphasis on astronomy and mathematics, its rural setting reminiscent of happier early childhood memories, and its small, close-knit community. The adjustment period proved difficult. Years of self-reliance had left him uncomfortable with structure and authority. His academic brilliance was matched by social awkwardness and occasional outbursts when triggered by institutional environments. Twice he packed his backpack and prepared to flee, only to reconsider at the last moment. During one particularly difficult period, when Elijah had stopped engaging in classes and isolated himself from other students, Keanu arranged to visit despite a grueling filming schedule. They spent an afternoon hiking through autumn-painted Vermont forests, the conversation flowing more naturally in motion than it ever had sitting still. "I don't belong here," Elijah confessed as they reached a scenic overlook. "Everyone else seems to know how to be normal. I'm trying, but I don't think I can do it." "Normal is overrated," Keanu replied, gazing out at the rolling landscape. "And you belong wherever you decide to put down roots. It's not about fitting into someone else's system. It's about finding spaces where your particular way of being in the world makes sense." That conversation marked a turning point. Elijah began to view his differences not as defects but as potential strengths. His unique perspective, shaped by extreme experiences most of his classmates couldn't imagine, gave him insights they lacked. His self-reliance translated into leadership potential when properly channeled. As months became years, the transformation continued, not as a straight line of improvement, but as a series of advances and retreats, triumphs and setbacks, all trending gradually toward stability. Keanu remained a constant presence in Elijah's life, though their contact evolved from crisis management to regular check-ins to occasional visits that felt increasingly like reunion of old friends rather than benefactor and recipient. By his senior year, Elijah had not only caught up academically but excelled, earning advanced placement credits and scholarship offers from several universities. The scared, hungry boy from that rainy Manhattan night still existed within him, but now as just one layer of a more complex, confident young man with genuine prospects for the future. 5 years after that fateful rainy night, a sleek black car pulled up outside Lumiere Restaurant. The establishment had maintained its reputation as one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining destinations, its Michelin stars and impossible reservation list keeping it firmly in the realm of the elite. A young man stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy suit. At 22, Elijah Parker carried himself with quiet confidence, his once matted hair now neatly trimmed, his formerly hollow cheeks filled out with health and proper nutrition. The maitre d' podium was still positioned at the entrance, though Philippe had long since moved on to another establishment. In his place stood a younger man with the same air of practiced elegance and superiority. He glanced up as Elijah approached. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "Yes," Elijah replied calmly. "Parker, table for two. My guest will be arriving shortly." The maitre d' scanned his tablet, expression shifting to one of deference when he located the name. "Ah, Mr. Parker, of course. We have your preferred table ready. Please, follow me." As they made their way through the restaurant, Elijah absorbed the familiar details, the crystal chandeliers, the pristine white tablecloths, the murmur of exclusive conversation. The sense of butter and wine and expensive perfume brought a flood of memories, not all of them pleasant. Yet he moved through the space with the easy familiarity of someone who belonged, nodding occasionally to other diners who recognized him from university fundraisers or scientific conferences where his early research in astrophysics had begun to draw attention. Elijah was seated at the very table he had once stared at through rain-streaked glass, a deliberate choice when he'd made the reservation. He ordered a sparkling water and settled into wait, his mind drifting back over the journey that had brought him to this moment. The years at the Vermont school had transformed him in ways that went beyond the physical. There had been academic triumphs, national mathematics competitions, a research project on exoplanet atmospheres that had earned recognition from NASA scientists. But more meaningful had been the emotional evolution, learning to trust, to form relationships, to believe in his own worth beyond mere survival. Keanu had remained true to his word throughout, providing not just financial support but genuine mentorship. Their communications had evolved from crisis management to increasingly infrequent but meaningful exchanges about life, philosophy, and Elijah's growing ambitions in astrophysics. The actor had attended Elijah's high school graduation quietly, avoiding publicity that might overshadow the young man's achievement. Now, as a second-year graduate student at Columbia with a prestigious fellowship, Elijah had reached a level of stability that once seemed impossible. Yet he had never forgotten where he'd come from, or the night that had changed everything. His contemplation was interrupted by a stir near the entrance. Keanu had arrived, characteristically understated despite his fame. The restaurant staff maintained professional composure, though whispers rippled through the dining room as he made his way to Elijah's table. They greeted each other with the easy warmth of old friends, their handshake evolving into a brief embrace. "You look good," Keanu observed as they settled into their seats. "The academic life clearly agrees with you." "Most days," Elijah agreed with a smile. "When I'm not drowning in research data or teaching undergrads who think astronomy means writing horoscopes." Their conversation flowed naturally as they ordered, touching on Elijah's research, Keanu's recent projects, mutual acquaintances. Neither mentioned the significance of their location until after the appetizers had been cleared. "It feels strange being back here," Elijah admitted, glancing around the restaurant. "I almost didn't recognize it at first, but then everything came flooding back." Keanu nodded, following his gaze. "Life has a way of bringing us full circle sometimes. Though I'd say the circumstances are considerably improved." "Considerably," Elijah agreed. He hesitated, then added, "I never properly thanked you. Not just for that night, but for everything that followed. For seeing something in me worth saving when no one else did." "You did the hard part," Keanu replied simply. "I just opened a door. You walked through it and kept going." As their main courses arrived, Elijah noticed a familiar face across the restaurant. Ms. Beaumont, now visibly older but still impeccably dressed, supervising the dining room with the same controlled efficiency. She hadn't recognized him yet, seeing only another well-dressed patron enjoying the exclusive atmosphere of her establishment. "I've been thinking about paying this place's success forward," Elijah said thoughtfully. "Starting a foundation for kids aging out of foster care, giving them options before they end up on the streets. Educational support, housing assistance, mentorship." Keanu's eyes reflected approval. Sounds like you've found your way to make ripples. I had a good example, Elijah replied, raising his water glass in a subtle toast. Outside the restaurant windows, rain had begun to fall again on Manhattan streets, a symmetry not lost on either man as they continued their meal. Two lives interconnected by a moment of simple human kindness that had changed everything.